My name is Grace. I'm 38 years old, and I was just stabbed, without a knife, by my own father, in front of dozens of relatives and business associates. That evening, the table was draped in white linen, wine glasses shimmering in candlelight, and everyone was toasting the family's success. McAllister Logistics had just been officially valued at over $82 million, a proud number for a company that had nearly gone bankrupt when I first stepped in at age 26. But no one at that dinner table knew that I, the only daughter in the family, was about to be cast aside with a single sentence. My father, Donald McAllister, stood up in the middle of the meal. His face was flushed with wine, but his eyes were sharp with intent. One hand rested on Luke's shoulder, my younger brother, who had just returned after 7 years of bouncing from one failed startup to another. His other hand lifted a glass of wine. His voice rang with pride. Dear family, close friends, I have wonderful news to share. Starting next week, Luke will be taking over operations at McAllister Logistics. I froze. The table fell silent for a few seconds. Then came a scatter of claps, followed by glasses clinking and voices rising. Congratulations, Luke! I could barely hear a thing anymore. Every sound felt miles away. All that remained was the pounding of my heart, as if it were trying to shatter my ribcage. I had spent over a decade in the office, restructuring the entire logistics system, cutting operating costs by 40%, expanding to 8 states. I was the one who signed an $18 million deal with the Federal Logistics Force 2 years ago. I was the reason this company was still standing. And now, all I got in return was a polite nod and the words, "Your brother will take over." I clenched my wine glass, forcing my hand to stay steady. My face kept smiling. No one would see me break. Not here, not in front of him, not in front of Luke. Luke glanced at me, trying to feign humility, but the smug glint in his eyes gave him away. I knew. He had known all along. It was all arranged. My father never believed I could be a rightful heir, no matter how much blood, sweat, and youth I had poured into this company. Across the table, my mother stared at me. She said nothing. She never did when my father made decisions, no matter how absurd. But her eyes said it all. I know. And I'm sorry. I lifted my glass slightly toward Luke. Congratulations, I said, my voice calm, almost icy. Glasses clinked. The evening went on. Laughter filled the room again. But something inside me had died completely. Not loyalty, not love, but the illusion that hard work would be recognized. They thought I would quietly step aside, like a temp at the end of her contract. But they forgot. I didn't just build this company with skill, I built it with foresight. And soon they would realize Grace McAllister is no pawn to be removed from the board, just because she carries the wrong last name. I didn't go home after that dinner. I drove straight to McAllister Logistics headquarters, a 5-story building on the edge of Nashville's Southern Industrial District. For the past 12 years, this place had been more of a home to me than any apartment I ever lived in. I stood in my office with the lights off, the glow from the street lamps spilling through the glass. There was the same walnut desk I picked out when I was appointed interim CEO at 30. The same hand-drawn market expansion plan from 4 years ago when I convinced the state of Texas to sign an industrial freight contract worth $11 million. Everything here had my fingerprint. Every deal, every digitized workflow, every paycheck issued on time. But to my father, it was all just temporary help. I remember my first year at the company like it happened yesterday. Back then, McAllister Logistics was a ship with torn sails. The New Orleans branch was under litigation. 3 senior drivers quit over unpaid insurance, and the dispatch system still ran on Excel 2003. No one wanted the job of fixing it, not even my uncle, who was then VP of Operations. I had to write a 27-page proposal and pitch it 3 times just to be given a 6-month trial run. My father had only said one thing: if you fail, don't blame anyone but yourself. I didn't fail. I restructured the entire operations system, rolled out custom-built logistics software with the tech team, and cut labor costs by nearly 32%. I personally negotiated the contract with the Defense Supply Center Columbus, a federal deal my father had dismissed, saying they're not serious. That very contract got us through COVID and kept nearly 200 employees from being laid off. Meanwhile, Luke was finding himself in Arizona, while I was on the highway with the tech crew handling a flipped container in a snowstorm on I-40. He was live streaming a wine tasting on Instagram. While I was up all night with legal battling a drivers' union lawsuit in Alabama, Luke was hosting a creative startup workshop at a Santa Fe coffee shop for 10 attendees. And yet, with just one dinner and one sentence, everything I had done was wiped clean, as if it had never mattered. But what truly stunned me wasn't the decision. It was the reason behind it. 3 years ago, I accidentally came across an email my father sent to an old partner in Minnesota. In it, he wrote about a 5-year transition plan to hand the company to my son. I thought I'd misread. At the time, Luke had just lost $200,000 on a failed delivery app. I almost confronted my father, but I hesitated. I wanted to believe he'd change once he saw what I was accomplishing. I was wrong. To him, men are born to lead. No matter how competent, women are meant to stay in the background. He once told me during a closed-door meeting, "You're good, Grace, but daughters aren't meant to carry an empire. One day you'll get tired. You'll want to stop." But Luke, he spoke like I was a temp nearing the end of her contract, and Luke was the default heir by virtue of gender alone. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I knew I didn't need permission. I would take back what I built, using the very rules he once taught me. The shareholder agreement from 5 years ago, the investment he took from me to launch the East Coast branch, the percentage he quietly transferred to me during the 2019 financial crisis. I forgot none of it. They thought I'd quietly back down because I'm a woman. They were wrong. Starting tomorrow, they'll learn that I'm not just Donald McAllister's daughter. I'm the one they underestimated most, and that was their biggest mistake. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that dinner, not out of pain, but because I had to calculate every move. What I was preparing wasn't a family conversation. It was a power reclamation strategy where timing was counted in seconds and mistakes meant failure. In an ideal world, I could walk into the boardroom and say, "I did it, now recognize me." But I've lived long enough in the real world to know, here a woman's value isn't measured by her achievements, but by her ability to become impossible to ignore. I booted up the internal server at 2:00 a.m. on Monday. The first document I opened was a 2017 loan agreement when my father accepted a $1,500,000 0 cents personal investment from me to save the Miami branch. In return, he signed over 18% equity with a 3-year buyback clause. That clause expired long ago. He never bought it back, and I never brought it up. The second file was a 2019 court record, when the company was sued by a freight partner for breach of contract. To avoid asset seizure, my father temporarily transferred another 12% of the company to my name. The court later rejected his attempt to reclaim it, meaning that equity never left my hands. Combined with the 30% I had accumulated over the years through dividend reinvestment, I now held exactly 60% of McAllister Logistics. And no one knew that but me. Not my father, not the family attorney, because I wasn't playing poker. I was playing chess. And my final move began at 8:45 a.m. on Wednesday, the day they planned a press conference to announce Luke as CEO. I arrived earlier than usual. The office buzzed with anticipation, employees whispering about a new era. Welcome signs were already standing in the lobby. "Welcome, CEO Luke McAllister." I glanced at them without slowing down. My heels clicked against the cold stone floor, every step steady, eyes averted. Everyone had heard about the dinner. Everyone thought I would disappear. I didn't. I entered the main conference room, powered on the projector, and plugged in a secure drive I had prepared in advance. Every document, original contract, legal record, shareholder authorization, they were all there, ready to pierce through every illusion. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m., my father walked in, Luke following. Both wore deep navy suits. They weren't surprised to see me. They thought I was there to hand over the keys. Donald placed his hand on the wooden table, speaking in that familiar, fake warm tone. Grace, I'm glad you're here. Today's transition is a big step forward, and we'll need your help getting it started. I didn't respond right away. I stood, pressed the presentation button. The screen lit up with the title, McAllister Logistics, Equity Ownership, legally verified as of last month. Luke frowned. What is this? I looked my father straight in the eye. A power summary and the answer to the question, who really owns this company? I went through each page, each one stamped and certified by an independent law firm. My father's brow furrowed at first. Then his face turned pale as I read the final line. Total shares held by Grace McAllister, 60%. Silence. Luke blurted out. What the hell is this? Dad, is this real? Donald clenched his jaw. It was a look I had never seen on him before. Not anger, but fear. My voice dropped, calm and clear. According to the 2015 shareholder agreement, any change in executive leadership must be approved by the majority stakeholder. That stakeholder is me. I turned to Luke, unblinking. If you want to be CEO, you'll need my vote. Do you have it? He didn't answer. He reached for his phone, ready to call someone. I placed my hand on the last folder. And before you call the family attorney, here's the updated equity filing submitted to the Tennessee Department of Commerce last week. All documents are legally binding. My father leaned back, exhaling like a man who just realized for the first time in his life that he had lost control. I looked at him, not with resentment, not with fear, but with certainty. I didn't come here to ask for permission. I came to remind everyone who kept this company alive. The room fell into absolute silence after I announced the 60%. The ceiling lights reflected off the glass table, mirroring the stunned look on my father's face and the raw panic written across Luke's. No one spoke during those first 10 seconds. I broke the tension myself. I'm not stepping down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of clarity that felt like command. And I don't have to. I'm exactly where this company needs me to be. My father sat, frozen, his face drained of color. He stared at the screen, at my name next to the line. Majority shareholder, 60%. Then he looked up, eyes sharpening. How long have you been planning this? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though every word sounded like dry gravel. Since the moment I realized my work would never be valued fairly, I answered bluntly. I wasn't waiting for permission from someone who decided to sideline me before I even outperformed my brother. Luke jumped to his feet, his chair clattering behind him, face flushed with a mix of rage and disbelief. What the hell is this? You tricked us into handing over the company? Dad! She's stealing everything. I let out a small laugh. Stealing? Luke, you couldn't keep a convenience store running for 6 months. Don't talk to me about running a national logistics firm. I'm not stealing. I'm keeping what was already mine. He snarled, I'm not accepting this. I'll sue you. I tilted my head, gaze fixed on him. Then I'd suggest you start by hiring a lawyer who can read English, because every document has been notarized and filed with the Tennessee Department of State. Luke turned to our father looking for help. Dad, you're just going to stand there? My father didn't answer right away. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned to Luke, voice dropping low. She planned this. Every document is real. Every stamp is valid. We have no way out. Luke looked like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're taking her side? I'm siding with reality, my father said quietly. And the reality is, we underestimated Grace. I looked at him, not smug, not victorious, just sure. I had been right not to wait for his approval. As for the CEO position, I continued, as of today, I'm retaining that role. You, Luke, have two options. Stay on as an operational advisor with a six-figure salary, or walk away and I'll buy out your remaining shares if you have any. You've lost it, Luke whispered, barely keeping it together. You think the board's going to let this slide? They won't stay quiet. I pulled another file from my briefcase and placed it on the table, sliding it toward my father. This is the shareholder proxy record from 3 months ago. I've secured voting authority from 3 board members, your old allies. They've already chosen results over loyalty, and numbers don't lie. No one responded. They didn't need to. I stood, adjusted my blazer collar, and let my eyes sweep across the room. I don't need anyone to admit I'm right anymore. I just need them not to get in my way. My father closed his eyes for a few seconds, then gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The final surrender of a seasoned general. I won't stand in your way, he said, but from this point on, you'll face the consequences alone. I nodded. That's exactly what I'm prepared for. Luke slammed his hand on the table and stormed out, leaving behind a fallen chair and a blank stare over his shoulder. My father remained seated, eyes fixed on the sunrise spilling through the wide glass windows. I gathered my documents, snapped my case shut, and walked out without another word. I knew the public war had only just begun, but the silent one, I had already won. 3 hours after the boardroom confrontation, I called an internal meeting with our legal team, senior HR officers, and the company's communications lead. From that moment forward, I wasn't just the majority shareholder. I was officially in full control of McAllister Logistics, on paper and in practice. I began with a short, no-frills statement. I know you've all heard a lot over the past 24 hours. It's time to clarify where we stand. I will remain CEO. Any leadership changes, if necessary, will be announced within the next week. No one pushed back. They just stared at me, like they were re-evaluating a person they thought they had known for over a decade. But I didn't need their sympathy. I needed their execution. Immediately after, I sent a private email to Luke with 2 attached documents. 1, an offer letter for a non-executive advisory role. 2, a share buyback agreement for his 6% equity at 10% above market value. I gave him a choice. There was no reply for 6 hours. But at exactly 8:00 p.m., a black SUV pulled up in front of the headquarters. Luke stepped into the elevator like a thundercloud, without lightning, just pressure. He didn't greet anyone, just walked straight to my office and knocked once. "Come in," I said. He didn't sit. He stood with both hands on the desk, trying to swallow a bitterness too thick to ignore. "Think the money," he said, voice lower than usual, "but don't think you won because you're better." I looked up from my screen, straight at him. "I don't need your validation," I said calmly. "I just need you out of my way." He growled, "I'm the son in this family, Grace. You were just the placeholder. You know that. Everyone does." I stood, refusing to let emotion shape my reaction. "You're entitled to believe that, but history won't be written by your assumptions. It'll be written by results." I slid the contract across the desk. "Just sign. The transfer will be complete within 24 hours. He grabbed a pen and signed without hesitation, each stroke carved with resentment. When he was done, he looked at me one last time, bitterness flooding his eyes. "Hope you know what you just lost," he muttered before turning and walking away. I didn't answer, because I knew exactly what I had preserved. The next day, my father showed up unannounced. No driver, no assistant. He looked older, his hair noticeably grayer overnight. I invited him in and poured him tea, not wine. It was time for us to talk, like 2 adults. Not a father and the daughter he'd always underestimated. He sat silently for a few minutes, then spoke, barely above a whisper. "I was wrong to think you'd always stay behind." I said nothing. I waited. I figured you'd get married, step out of the business, look for an easier life. I didn't think you'd fight to the end. I set my teacup down. I didn't fight to outdo anyone. I just couldn't walk away from something I built. He nodded, still looking down. Luke won't come back, he said quietly. He can't handle losing, especially not to his sister. For the first time, I saw the exhaustion behind the hardened man he had always been. You don't owe me an apology, I said. Just stop standing in my way. He was quiet for a long time, then stood. Alistair Logistics is yours now, he said, voice rough. I'm stepping away from all operations. Effective today. I nodded. I appreciate that. As he turned and walked out of my office, I realized this was no longer a battle. It was the end of an old chapter and the beginning of one I'd write myself. Less than 72 hours after Luke signed the withdrawal papers and my father announced his resignation, a new battle began. Not in the boardroom, but in the press. The first article appeared in a regional financial magazine. Grace McAllister, the cold-hearted woman who pushed her family out of the company. My image was superimposed over an old photo of my father and Luke, making it look like I had crashed some sacred family portrait. They labeled me the CEO who defied family values, claimed I completely dismantled the family culture, and ushered in a ruthless new era of leadership. I wasn't surprised. I expected this kind of pushback, but what made me pause was the source cited, a recently departed senior executive. I knew exactly who that was. Over the next 3 days, financial media outlets echoed the same narrative. McAllister Logistics in turmoil after leadership shakeup. New female CEO faces resistance from the board. Donald and Luke's exit raises concerns over company stability. I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't post a rebuttal on LinkedIn. I didn't issue a traditional statement. Instead, I sent a short message to Nicole Stratton, a veteran investigative journalist my father had banned from the company 10 years ago after she wrote a piece that hit too close to home. I have a story, but you have to tell it exactly as it is. Less than an hour later, Nicole was in my office. I opened my laptop and shared with her a file nearly 300 pages long, including audit report manually altered to conceal nearly $3,800,000, 0 cents in internal debt. A warehouse lease in Louisiana signed with a shell company owned by my father's close friend, charging double the market rate. Internal memos showing how the employee insurance fund was redirected to cover PR costs in 2019. I had never intended to expose these things. I used to believe that silence protected the family's reputation. But if they wanted to play dirty, I wasn't afraid to drag the truth through the mud to bring it into the light. Nicole didn't ask many questions. When I finished, she simply said, "I'll take care of the rest." 2 days later, the article dropped. The front page of Business Integrity Journal read, "The McAllister Empire nearly collapsed under internal corruption, and the only one left standing was Grace." The piece was nearly 5,000 words, packed with verified documents, photos, analysis, and confirmations from independent auditors. It didn't smear anyone. It simply told the truth. And that was more than enough. Within 24 hours of the article's release, the board sent a congratulatory email commending the transparency and integrity of the new leadership. A major investor from New York, who had previously considered pulling out, returned with an offer to increase their stake by 15%. Senior staff began publicly voicing support for me on the company's internal network. Even a former VP who had resigned years ago after clashing with my father sent a letter requesting to return. And my father? He called me at 8:00 p.m. and left a single voicemail. "You didn't have to go that far." I listened to it, then deleted it, because I didn't go that far. I simply let the truth speak, the truth they had buried for years. The next morning, I walked into the office like I always did, but for the first time since I took over, I didn't feel like anyone was watching my every move. The whispers in the hallways were gone. The suspicious glances had faded. The glass walls no longer reflected a woman struggling to survive. They reflected someone who had finally taken control of the game. The week following the exposé was a brief calm before the largest wave of transformation in McAllister Logistics history. I knew that simply holding my position wouldn't be enough. At any moment, they could try to pull me down again. What I needed wasn't temporary control, it was an irreversible structure. A special board meeting was called for Monday at 9 o'clock a.m. on the top floor of the company headquarters. No champagne, no buffet, no guests. Just 12 people. Former loyalists to my father for over a decade, now forced to confront something none of them had ever imagined. A female CEO who wasn't interim anymore. I presented the most recent quarterly report, compiled by me and our new CFO, Linda Price. Profits were up 24% year over year. Customer complaints had dropped by 37%. Average delivery time was down by 1.4 days. There were no objections, no questions, not even a furrowed brow. I looked each of them in the eye and spoke directly. This is the moment to cut ties with outdated leadership. Anyone who disagrees with the new direction is welcome to take an honorary advisory role or step down quietly. The first to respond was Charles Denton, who once served as board chair under my father. He was experienced and had been hard on me in past meetings. But today, he simply nodded. "I'll move into an advisory position," he said, "and I support your reform plan." 4 others followed suit quickly. 3 asked for more time to consider. A delay, I knew, was just a graceful way to exit. I didn't need them anymore. Within 2 weeks, I had replaced almost the entire leadership team. Regional directors, who had reported directly to my father but operated with questionable financial transparency, were offered early retirement. The old head of HR was replaced with Megan Sloan, an outsider to the old system, with a background in modern organizational leadership. Linda was officially promoted from interim to full CFO, and I restructured the internal audit team, bringing in 3 new hires from outside the company. But changing people was just the beginning. I pivoted the entire operational strategy toward an integrated digital platform, eliminating the outdated tracking systems the company had used since 2012. Real-time logistics management software was launched. AI-powered route analytics were implemented across both operations and customer service. Hundreds of manual work hours vanished within a month. I also launched an anonymous internal feedback channel. Any employee could report misconduct or suggest improvements without fear of retaliation. A system once dismissed by the old guard as a breeding ground for chaos produced over 240 submissions in its first month, most of them valuable. Investors started coming back. A Denver-based fund that had pulled out mid-year returned with a proposal to invest in our Western distribution network. 3 major retail partners signed new contracts, paving the way for our Canadian expansion later that year. And it all came down to one thing: confidence in actual competence. Not bloodline, not legacy. I didn't forget those who stayed silent when I was pushed aside, but I didn't waste time seeking revenge either. Every decision now had to be for the company, not for pride. One afternoon, while checking on the progress of our new warehouse management system, I received an email from Mr. Denton. The subject line was simple: "Grace, I was wrong." I didn't open it right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen. Maybe in another universe, I would have cried. But here, at McAllister Logistics, I didn't need apologies anymore. I had authority, I had data, and most importantly, I had results. 1 year after the lawful coup at McAllister Logistics, I sat in the same boardroom where everything had once collapsed, and where I had rebuilt it all from the ground up. On the screen before me, the latest financial report displayed one simple line: total market value, $106 million, 0 cents. I didn't celebrate, I didn't cry, I simply closed the laptop, took a sip of cold coffee, and told myself, that's enough to ensure they never doubt me again. For an entire year, I worked like I was racing time itself. No vacations, no victory dinners, not a single relaxed day. But in return, I gained something I once thought I could never own: a company rebuilt by my own hands, a system no longer propped up by family ties, and a team that followed me because of competence, not because of a last name on a door. 3 months ago, my father officially relinquished all authority. He retained a nominal 2% share, but no longer played any role in decision-making. During our final meeting at a cafe near the old office, he said one thing. "You won." I remember I just smiled. No rebuttal. No justification. Because I didn't need to defeat him. What I needed was to overcome the outdated mindset that once dismissed me from every negotiation table simply because I wasn't a son. As for Luke, after the buyout, he vanished from the industry. I heard rumors he's running a small bar in Seattle, trying to rebuild something of his own. The last message I received from him was on our mother's birthday. Just one line. "You're actually better than I ever thought." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Through this journey, what haunted me most wasn't the betrayal, the media smear, or the early isolation. It was that old feeling that if I worked hard enough, sacrificed deeply enough, my father would finally acknowledge me, that he'd be proud. But the truth is, what I truly needed wasn't his applause. It was me, a version of myself no longer waiting on anyone's approval. In early June, McAllister Logistics secured a long-term transport contract with the 3 largest hospital networks in the West. That deal pushed our company valuation past $100 million, 0 cents. My name appeared on Forbes Regional Edition's top 20 influential CEOs in the Midwest. They described me as the woman redefining succession in American family-owned enterprise. I read that article while waiting for the coffee machine in the employee break room. Next to me stood Linda, our new CFO. "You planning to print that and hang it up somewhere?" she asked, half joking. I shook my head. "No need. The people I wanted to convince, they've already gone quiet." I don't need titles to know my worth. I see it every day. In clean financial reports, in honest employee feedback, in partners who reach out first because they believe. And perhaps the biggest lesson I've learned wasn't in any business plan. It's this. True power doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from rising when you're cast aside and claiming the seat that should have been yours all along. I no longer try to prove I deserve to be here. I just make sure no one ever gets the chance to deny it. Grace's story is a powerful reminder that in the real world, effort and talent are sometimes dismissed by bias and tradition. But when you stay true to your values, keep preparing, and face challenges head-on, you don't just reclaim what's rightfully yours. You build a position no one can take from you. Real power isn't given, it's claimed through courage, strategy, and the silence that leads to decisive action. What are your thoughts on Grace's journey and how she took back what she deserved? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more moving stories about family and life.